He gave her money for the bus, not knowing she was a CEO millionaire, and fell madly in love with him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In the quiet corners of a bustling city, where the world seems to be in a constant rush, a simple act of kindness was about to change two lives forever. Emily had been living a life of luxury for years. She ran one of the most successful tech companies in the country, a company she built from the ground up. But as powerful as she was, there was always a part of her that felt disconnected, like she was always behind a wall of glass, unable to truly experience the world as it was. On this particular day, after a stressful meeting with her investors, Emily found herself at the bus stop, just down the street from her office. It was not typical for someone like her to take the bus, but today she had missed her car service and had no choice. She stood there in her expensive heels, looking at her phone as the world around her seemed to move at double speed. The street was wet from the morning rain, and the chill in the air made her pull her coat tighter around her body. As she checked the time, a figure walked up to the bus stop, a man in his 40s, wearing an old, worn-out jacket, his boots looking like they had seen better days. His face was tired, and there was a slight tremble in his hands as he fumbled for his bus pass. Emily noticed him immediately, but she didn't think much of it. After all, people like her didn't often interact with people like him. He seemed out of place, much like she felt today. The man stood there silently, shivering slightly from the cold. Emily couldn't help but glance at him again. He looked like he had nowhere to go, like he was stuck in a loop he couldn't escape. The bus was taking longer than usual, and the man began to shuffle nervously. Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. When she looked up, she saw him glancing at her, his eyes briefly meeting hers before he looked down again, as though embarrassed. Without really thinking, she approached him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft. "Are you all right? You seem like you need something." The man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. I had my wallet stolen earlier today," he said, his voice low and uncertain. "I need $10 for the bus. I swear I'll pay you back as soon as I can." Emily paused for a second, taking in his words. She could see that he wasn't lying. There was sincerity in his voice, even if his appearance didn't match the story he was telling. Looking at him, she noticed the weariness in his face, the kind that came from years of hard living. She reached into her purse without hesitation and pulled out the last $10 she had in cash. "Here," she said, holding out the bill. "Take it. I don't need it as much as you do." The man's eyes widened, and for a moment, he seemed lost for words. He took the money carefully, like it was more than just cash to him. It was a lifeline. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking. "I really appreciate this. I promise I'll pay you back, I swear." Emily gave him a small smile, trying to reassure him. "Don't worry about it," she said. "Just make sure you get home safely." With that, the bus arrived, and she watched as the man boarded, giving her one last grateful look before disappearing into the crowd. Emily stood there for a moment, the cold wind cutting through her coat, but she didn't mind. There was something about the encounter that stayed with her. It wasn't the money, it was the connection. She had never known what it was like to truly help someone like that, without any expectation in return. Little did she know, this small act of kindness would set in motion a series of events that would change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. The man, Henry, would not just return her kindness, he would change the way she looked at the world and challenge everything she thought she knew about love, life, and what truly mattered. It had been a week since Emily had given Henry the last $10 she had in her wallet. She hadn't expected anything to come of it, just a simple act of kindness in a world that seemed to lack it. Yet, somehow, it felt like something had changed within her, a small but noticeable shift in how she viewed the world around her. That feeling lingered as she walked through the busy streets of the city, heading to another meeting with her investors. She tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but her mind kept drifting back to that brief encounter at the bus stop. She couldn't shake the thought of Henry, the man she had helped out of a difficult situation. He was still a mystery to her, but she couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward him. As the days passed, Emily began to notice him more and more around the city, in places she never thought to look before. She saw him at a coffee shop one morning, sitting in the corner, reading a newspaper. She almost didn't recognize him at first. His face seemed less worn, his posture a little straighter, as if the money she had given him a glimmer of hope. He looked up, and their eyes met for a brief moment. Emily quickly looked away, not wanting to make him uncomfortable. But that brief interaction stayed with her throughout the day. She found herself thinking about him again, wondering how he was doing, if he had found a way to get back on his feet. She didn't know why it bothered her so much. She had helped people before, but this felt different. The next day, Emily found herself walking past the same coffee shop. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to go inside. As she walked in, the familiar smell of fresh coffee beans filled the air. She spotted Henry sitting at the same table from the day before. This time, he didn't seem as absorbed in his newspaper. He was looking out the window, his face expressionless, as if lost in thought. Emily walked up to him slowly, unsure of what she was doing. "Hi," she said softly, her voice shaky. Henry looked up, in surprise, his eyes widening for a moment before he quickly masked his surprise with a faint smile. "Oh, hey," he said, his voice warm but guarded. "I didn't expect to see you here." Emily smiled awkwardly, unsure of how to continue the conversation. I just wanted to check in on you," she said, her words coming out more easily than she expected. "I've been thinking about you since the bus stop." Henry's expression softened at her words. He seemed to hesitate for a moment before nodding. "I've been all right," he said, his voice quieter now. Things are better." Emily sat down across from him, her curiosity getting the best of her. "Better?" she asked. "What happened?" Henry chuckled softly, a dry, humorless sound. "Well, I managed to find a part-time job at a warehouse," he explained. "It's not much, but it's something. It's enough to get by for now." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "That's great," she said. "I'm really glad to hear that." For a moment, the two of them sat in silence, sipping their drinks. Emily found herself studying him more closely now. He didn't look like the man who had been standing at the bus stop just a week ago, desperate and cold. There was something more relaxed about him, a hint of hope that hadn't been there before. But at the same time, there was a guardedness in his eyes, a wariness that made Emily wonder just how much he had been through. Finally, Henry spoke again, breaking the silence. "You know, I've been meaning to thank you," he said quietly, his voice sincere. "What you did for me, it really made a difference. I don't know what I would have done without that money." Emily smiled, but she felt a strange flutter in her chest. "You don't have to thank me," she said, her voice soft. "It was just $10. But I'm glad it helped." "It wasn't just the money," Henry said, his tone serious now. "It was the fact that you helped me when you didn't have to. That meant more than anything." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected him to say anything like that. It made her feel strange, but in a good way. "I don't know why I did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just felt like I had to." Henry looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to understand something he couldn't quite put his finger on. "You're a good person," he said quietly. Emily didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't used to hearing compliments like that, especially not from someone like him. She had always been so focused on work, on building her company, that she hadn't really thought about what kind of person she was. But in that moment, sitting across from Henry, she felt something stir inside her. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was the connection she felt with him, or maybe it was just the realization that her life had been more about success and less about meaning. Either way, she couldn't deny that something had changed, and she couldn't help but wonder if, somehow, it had something to do with Henry. As they continued to talk, the conversation turned to lighter topics. They shared stories about their lives, their pasts, and their hopes for the future. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt like she was truly connecting with someone who didn't care about her title or her wealth, someone who saw her for who she really was. It felt good. Too good, in fact. She tried to push away the nagging feeling in her chest, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to feel more than just gratitude toward Henry. And that thought, more than anything, unsettled her. It had been several days since Emily and Henry had their coffee together. The connection between them had only grown stronger, but both of them were still unsure about what to do with it. Emily, who had spent years building an empire, was used to control, precision, and logic. But with Henry, she felt like she was losing grip on everything she thought she knew about herself. She was starting to feel something deeper for him, something more real than she had ever experienced. It wasn't just gratitude for his kindness, but an undeniable pull she couldn't ignore. Henry, on the other hand, was still cautious. He had learned to protect himself over the years, and he wasn't sure what to make of Emily. The woman who had helped him when he had nothing, was she really the person she appeared to be? Or was she just another wealthy, distant figure, like all the others he had encountered in his life? It was hard to tell. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, but the wall she had built around herself made it difficult for him to fully trust her. Still, the time they had spent together, talking about their lives, their hopes, and dreams, had planted a seed of curiosity in his heart. He wanted to know more. The next few weeks were filled with more encounters between them. Emily would find herself going out of her way to cross paths with Henry. Sometimes, it was just a brief hello at the coffee shop. Other times they would sit and talk for hours. Henry had started to share more about his past, his family, his job, and the hardships he had endured. Emily listened, genuinely interested, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was truly connecting with someone who didn't care about her success or wealth. One day, as the winter chill began to fade, Emily decided to take a risk. She invited Henry to an event, a charity gala her company was hosting. It wasn't the kind of thing Henry would normally attend, but there was something about the idea that intrigued him. Emily promised him that he wouldn't be out of place, and she would make sure he felt comfortable. As the day of the gala approached, Emily found herself nervous. She had always attended these events with her colleagues or clients, but bringing Henry felt different. She wasn't sure if she was ready to reveal the full extent of her life to him, the life that had always felt so disconnected from the world he lived in. The night of the gala arrived, and Emily stood in front of the mirror in her luxurious penthouse apartment. She adjusted her dress, checking her appearance one last time. She looked the part, elegant, polished, and composed. But as she stared at her reflection, she couldn't help but feel a little lost. Would Henry still see her as the same person he had met at the bus stop? Or would the world she lived in change everything? As the evening wore on, Emily's thoughts kept drifting back to Henry. Would he enjoy the event? Would he be comfortable in a room full of people who measured success in millions and billions? When the time came, Emily left her apartment, heading to the venue. She arrived first, knowing Henry would be there soon. She greeted her colleagues and the guests who had already arrived, all while anxiously checking the door. Then, she saw him. Henry walked in, looking out of place in his casual clothes, but somehow still managing to stand out. He wasn't the typical well-dressed man she was used to seeing at these events, but there was something about him that immediately captured everyone's attention. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Emily, his face softened with a smile. Emily felt her heart skip a beat as she walked toward him, feeling a mix of emotions that she couldn't quite explain. "You made it," she said, her voice a little breathless. "I wasn't sure if you would want to come." "I almost didn't," Henry admitted, his voice low but warm. But something about this night felt different. As they talked, Emily noticed that Henry wasn't as nervous as she had feared. He seemed at ease, even in a room full of strangers. And as the night went on, she realized that it wasn't just the event that was different, it was Henry. He wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was real, and that was something she couldn't ignore. The night passed in a blur of conversations and small talk, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. As they walked outside, the cool evening air greeted them. Emily felt her nerves settle, and she glanced at Henry. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft. Henry smiled. "Thank you for inviting me. I don't think I've ever been to something like this before." "You were great," Emily said, her words coming out before she could stop them. "I didn't think you'd enjoy it, but you seemed to fit right in." Henry looked at her, his expression serious. "I didn't fit in," he said, "but I didn't need to. I just needed to be myself." Emily felt a lump form in her throat as she realized how true his words were. She had spent so many years trying to fit in, trying to prove her worth, but Henry was showing her something completely different. It wasn't about fitting in, it was about being authentic, about embracing who you really were. And for the first time, Emily realized she didn't need to hide behind her title or her wealth. She could just be herself, and that was enough. "You're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I've been trying too hard." Henry smiled softly. "Maybe we both have." As they stood there in the quiet of the evening, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The walls she had built around herself were starting to come down, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for Henry, for showing her what truly mattered. It had been a few weeks since Emily and Henry's conversation at the gala. The connection between them had only deepened, but now both of them were faced with a new challenge. Emily had never been someone to let her personal life interfere with her work, but with Henry, things were different. She found herself thinking about him more than she ever expected, and it was becoming harder to ignore the pull she felt toward him. Henry, too, seemed to be wrestling with his feelings. He had been through so much in his life, and the idea of opening himself up to someone, especially someone like Emily, scared him. He had never been part of her world, and he wasn't sure if he belonged there. But despite his doubts, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He had come to realize that Emily wasn't like the other women he had met in his life. She was different, real, kind, and thoughtful. She didn't look down on him like others did. She saw him for who he was, not his circumstances. One afternoon, Emily was in her office, preparing for another important meeting when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and saw Henry's name. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from him in a few days, and part of her wondered if he was starting to pull away. She quickly answered, "Hey, Henry. Everything okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied. "Actually, I was wondering if you wanted to grab a drink tonight. Just us. No gala, no fancy events. I just thought it might be nice to hang out without all the pressure." Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. She smiled to herself, glad to know he still wanted to spend time with her. "That sounds perfect," she said. "I'd love to." Later that evening, Emily arrived at the bar Henry had suggested, a small, cozy place tucked away from the city's chaos. The dim lighting and the sound of soft music created the perfect atmosphere for a relaxed evening. Henry was already there, sitting at a table by the window, a drink in front of him. He stood up as soon as he saw her. "Hey," he said with a smile. "You look great." "Thanks," Emily replied, feeling a little nervous. "You're not so bad yourself." They both laughed, and for a moment, the tension that had been building between them seemed to melt away. They sat down, and the conversation flowed easily. They talked about everything and nothing, movies they liked, places they wanted to visit, and even their childhoods. Emily found herself opening up in a way she hadn't with anyone in a long time. There was something about Henry that made her feel like she could be herself, no masks, no pretenses. As the evening wore on, Emily started to realize that Henry wasn't just someone she was casually getting to know. He was becoming someone she couldn't imagine her life without. She had already fallen for him, but she didn't know if he felt the same way. Henry, for his part, was also starting to admit that he was falling for her. The way she laughed, the way she listened to him, the way she made him feel seen and understood, it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. But even as the night continued, he kept his guard up. He didn't know if this relationship could work, and he didn't want to get hurt. He couldn't ignore the fact that Emily lived in a completely different world than he did. She was rich, powerful, and surrounded by people who could offer her anything she wanted. He was just a regular guy, someone who had struggled for most of his life. How could someone like him ever be enough for someone like her? As they finished their drinks, Emily noticed the silence that had settled between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was filled with unspoken words. She could feel the weight of what was happening. This wasn't just a casual relationship. This was something real. She looked at Henry, her heart pounding in her chest. "Henry," she started, her voice soft. "I know. Things between us are complicated, but I need you to know something." He looked at her, his eyes filled with curiosity. "What is it?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I care about you, more than I ever thought I could, and I just need you to know that." Henry's heart skipped a beat. He stared at her for a long moment, unsure of how to respond. But then, something inside him shifted. He had been holding back, but he didn't want it anymore. He had been afraid of what might happen, afraid of getting hurt. But Emily had made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. He smiled, his eyes softening. "I care about you too, Emily. I don't know how to do this, how to make it work." Emily reached across the table, gently taking his hand. "We'll figure it out," she said. "One step at a time." The moment their hands touched, something inside both of them clicked into place. They didn't need to have all the answers right then. All they needed was each other. They sat there for a while longer, talking and laughing, until the bar started to empty out. As they stood up to leave, Henry pulled her into a hug. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. In that moment, Emily realized that she didn't need to have it all figured out. All she needed was to be with Henry. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days that followed their conversation at the bar were filled with a quiet, unspoken understanding between Emily and Henry. Their bond had deepened, but both of them were still walking a delicate line. Emily was trying to balance her growing feelings for Henry with the demands of her career, and Henry, despite his affection for her, still struggled with the notion that someone like Emily could really care for someone like him. They continued to meet, sometimes for coffee, other times for walks through the park. Each moment spent together brought them closer, but it also brought out the insecurities they both had hidden deep down. Emily's world was filled with luxury and power. She ran a tech company worth millions, had an impeccable reputation, and was surrounded by people who admired her success. But none of that seemed to matter when she was with Henry. With him, she was free from the expectations that came with her title. She could just be herself, no masks, no facades. But even as their connection grew, Emily knew there were things she hadn't yet told Henry. Her past, the weight of her responsibilities, and the expectations placed on her by her family and company. She hadn't told him the full truth about the life she led, and that bothered her. Henry, for his part, was equally conflicted. He had always been the man on the outside, looking in. He had spent most of his life fighting to survive, and the idea of someone like Emily wanting to be with him seemed too good to be true. He had grown used to disappointment and rejection, but something about Emily made him want to take a chance. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that eventually, his past, his struggles, would catch up with him, and Emily would walk away. The fear of rejection weighed on him, but he knew that he couldn't keep his distance from her. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Emily sat in her office, staring at her laptop screen, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. She hadn't heard from Henry all day, and she couldn't help but wonder if he was pulling back. Maybe their relationship wasn't as solid as she thought. Maybe it was just a temporary thing. But then, her phone buzzed, and a message from Henry appeared on the screen. "Can we meet tonight? I need to talk to you." Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly typed back, "Of course, where?" Henry replied, "The park by the lake. I'll be there in an hour." Emily didn't know what to expect, but she knew this conversation was important. She grabbed her coat and headed out the door, her mind racing with possibilities. When she arrived at the park, she spotted Henry right away. He was sitting on a bench, staring out at the water, his hands in his pockets. He looked deep in thought, his brow furrowed as if he were struggling with something. Emily approached him slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Hey," she said softly. Henry turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Hey," he replied, his voice low. He motioned for her to sit next to him. "I'm glad you came." Emily sat down beside him, her heart pounding in her chest. She could sense that something was weighing on him, something important. "What's going on, Henry?" she asked gently. He looked out at the water again, his gaze distant. "I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice hesitant. "But I think I need to be honest with you about something." Emily's stomach churned, and she braced herself for what was coming. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady. Henry took a deep breath before turning to face her. "I'm not the man you think I am," he said quietly. "I've been hiding things from you. I didn't want you to know the truth." Emily felt a pang of confusion and concern. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Henry hesitated, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm not just a guy who had a rough time. I'm someone who's been living in survival mode for years. I've been doing everything I can to get by, to survive. And I don't know if that's the kind of life you want to be a part of. I don't know if I can give you the life you deserve." Emily felt her heart sink. She had always known that Henry's past was complicated, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel more real, more daunting. "Henry," she began softly, "I don't care about your past. I care about who you are now. And I want to be with you, no matter what." Henry shook his head, his eyes filled with doubt. "But you don't understand. I don't belong in your world. I don't belong with you." Emily reached out, taking his hand in hers. "That's not true," she said firmly. I don't need you to be someone else. I just need you to be you. The man I've come to care about. The man who has shown me what real kindness is. That's all I need. Henry looked at her, his eyes searching hers as if trying to figure out if she was telling the truth. Slowly, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. You really mean that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily smiled back, her heart swelling with affection. Yes, I do. For a moment, they sat in silence, their hands still intertwined, the sound of the water gently lapping at the shore filling the air. Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. Despite all the fears and uncertainties, despite the differences in their worlds, she knew that this was real. And maybe that was enough. As the evening grew darker, Emily and Henry stood up, still holding hands. Come on, Emily said with a smile. Let's go for a walk. Together, they walked along the lake, side by side, the future uncertain but full of possibilities. Neither of them knew where this journey would take them, but for the first time in a long time, they were both ready to find out. The days after their heart-to-heart by the lake passed in a quiet, gentle flow. Emily and Henry continued to see each other, their bond growing deeper with each passing day. For Emily, it felt like a breath of fresh air. She had spent so many years focusing solely on work, her career, and the world she built around her that she had almost forgotten how to just be human. Henry had shown her that. With him, she felt like she could let go of the walls she had built around herself. She didn't need to be perfect, didn't need to pretend to be someone she wasn't. For the first time in years, Emily felt truly alive. But despite how good it felt to be with Henry, Emily couldn't ignore the reality of their situation. There were still so many things that set them apart. Henry had never experienced the life she led, the wealth, the power, the influence. He had struggled his entire life, and she knew that her world, her family, and her company could sometimes feel like an insurmountable barrier. And Henry, despite his growing affection for her, still wrestled with the idea that he didn't belong in her world. His doubts crept in, especially when he saw the lifestyle she was accustomed to. There were moments when he caught himself comparing their lives and wondering if he could ever truly fit in. He had lived with rejection his whole life, and the fear of one day being cast aside because of who he was loomed over him like a cloud. Emily could sense his uncertainty, and while she tried to reassure him, the differences in their worlds were hard to ignore. One evening, after a particularly tough week of meetings, Emily sat in her office, reflecting on the growing distance between them. She hadn't seen Henry for a few days, and she missed him more than she had anticipated. It was starting to feel like their relationship was on the brink of something important, but there was a part of her that feared it would all slip away if they didn't address the underlying issues. She had already opened her heart to him, but what if he couldn't open his to her? She needed to know how he truly felt. Later that evening, she sent him a text, asking if they could meet. He replied almost immediately, agreeing to meet at the same park by the lake. Emily's heart fluttered with anticipation as she changed into something comfortable, grabbed her jacket, and headed out the door. The cool evening air greeted her as she walked to the park. She spotted Henry almost immediately. He was sitting on their usual bench, his hands clasped together as he looked out over the water. When he saw her approaching, a small smile tugged at his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something heavy in his expression, something she hadn't seen before. As she sat down beside him, she could feel the tension in the air. She didn't want to waste time with small talk, not tonight. She needed to know what was going on in his mind. Henry, she said softly, what's really going on? I can feel that something's not right. Henry looked at her, his eyes filled with conflict. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. I don't want to hold you back, he said quietly. I'm not like you. I can't give you the life you're used to. I don't belong in your world. Emily felt a pang in her chest as his words hit her. She had feared this moment, the moment when his insecurities would come to the surface. She reached out, gently placing her hand on his. I never asked you to be like me, she said softly. I just want you to be you. You're enough, Henry. More than enough. Henry shook his head, his brow furrowed in frustration. You don't get it, Emily. I don't even know how to fit in. I don't know how to be a part of your world. You have everything. Your company, your family, your success. I'm just me. I don't want you to feel like you're settling for something less. Emily felt the weight of his words, but she refused to back down. I'm not settling for anything, Henry, she said firmly. I want to be with you. I don't care about your past, your job, or your status. I care about you. The man I've come to know. The man who's been kind and patient with me. That's who I want. Henry stared at her, his eyes searching hers for any sign that she was just saying what she thought he wanted to hear. He found none. She meant every word. Slowly, his features softened, and the guardedness he had been holding on to began to fade. I just don't want to mess this up, he said quietly. Emily squeezed his hand. You're not messing anything up. We're in this together. One step at a time. And we'll figure it out, whatever comes our way. Henry looked down at their joined hands, his thumb gently tracing her skin. He didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, he realized that he was willing to take a chance on them. On her. For the first time in a long while, Henry allowed himself to believe that he could have something real, something that wasn't defined by his past or his struggles. He could be happy. With Emily, they sat there for a long time, the night settling around them, but the tension had lifted. In its place was a quiet understanding, an unspoken promise that no matter what their future held, they would face it together. As they stood up to leave, Henry took a deep breath, looking at Emily with a soft smile. Thank you, he said quietly, for believing in me. Emily smiled back. There's nothing to thank me for, Henry. I believe in us. Together, they walked back through the park, side by side, both of them feeling a sense of peace they hadn't felt before. They didn't know what would come next, but they knew they were ready to face it together. The weeks following their heartfelt conversation by the lake felt like a slow but steady unraveling of all the walls Emily and Henry had built around themselves. The doubts, the fears, the hesitations, they were still there, but they seemed a little less daunting when they faced them together. Emily's life, with its high-powered meetings, corporate events, and constant expectations, remained the same, but Henry had started to feel like a grounding force in her world, a place where she could be herself without the weight of her title. She hadn't realized how much she longed for that until she found it in him. For Henry, the shift was even more profound. He had lived most of his life with the belief that he was always an outsider, never truly belonging anywhere. But with Emily, he had started to understand that maybe he didn't have to fit into a mold that was never meant for him. Maybe his past didn't define him as much as he thought. Still, the fear lingered. For both of them. The fear that this relationship, as beautiful and real as it felt, was too fragile to last in the face of the lives they came from. One evening, as they sat together in Emily's apartment, the city lights shining through the windows, Henry turned to her with a hesitant look in his eyes. Emily, there's something I've been thinking about, he began, his voice soft but serious. She turned to him, concerned. What's wrong? I've been thinking about the future, he said slowly. About us. And about how different our lives are. I know you said you didn't care about my past, but I just can't shake the feeling that, one day, I won't be enough for you. Emily felt her chest tighten at his words. She knew this conversation was coming, but hearing him say it out loud still hit her harder than she expected. Henry, don't say that, she said, reaching for his hand. You are more than enough. I've never wanted anyone else. And I don't care about your past or what you've been through. All I care about is who you are now. Henry squeezed her hand gently, but the doubt still lingered in his eyes. It's not just about you and me. It's everything else. Your family, your company, the world you live in. I'm not sure I fit into any of that. Emily took a deep breath. She knew this moment was inevitable, but she wasn't ready to give up on them. I understand that it's scary, she said softly. But Henry, I don't need you to fit into my world. I just need you to be with me. And I'll be with you. That's all that matters. Henry remained silent for a moment, his eyes searching hers as though trying to gauge the sincerity in her words. Finally, he nodded, though the uncertainty didn't fully disappear from his expression. I don't want to lose you, he admitted quietly. Emily felt a pang of sympathy for him. She could see how deeply he was struggling with the idea that their worlds might never fully align. You won't lose me, she said firmly. But you have to trust me. Trust us. As the night went on, they didn't talk about it any further. They spent the evening in a comfortable silence, enjoying each other's company, but the tension remained in the back of Emily's mind. The next morning, Emily woke up to an unexpected text from her mother. I need to see you today. It's urgent. Emily frowned as she read the message, the tone of it unsettling her. She hadn't spoken to her mother in over a week, and things between them had been tense ever since Emily started dating Henry. Her family had always been concerned about her choices, particularly when it came to relationships. They didn't see Henry as someone who could offer her the kind of life they believed she deserved. Emily knew this conversation was going to be difficult, but she also knew it was necessary. She couldn't keep hiding her relationship from her family forever. After a brief pause, Emily typed back, "I'll be there in an hour." As she made her way to her mother's house, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in her stomach. She wasn't sure what her mother wanted to talk about, but she had a feeling it wasn't going to be easy. When she arrived, her mother greeted her at the door with a tight-lipped smile, her expression unreadable. "Emily, come in," she said, stepping aside to let her daughter enter. Emily took a deep breath and followed her into the living room. Her mother motioned for her to sit down. "I've been thinking about everything lately," she began, her tone unusually calm. "About your career, your life, and the people you're associating with." Emily raised an eyebrow. "What are you trying to say?" Her mother looked at her for a long moment, as though deciding how to approach the conversation. "I know you've been seeing someone," she said carefully, "and I understand that relationships are your personal business, but I think you need to be careful. The people you surround yourself with, they can have a huge impact on your life, Emily." Emily's heart sank. She could already tell where this was going. "I know what you're going to say," she said, her voice steady. "You don't think Henry is right for me. You think he doesn't fit into our world." Her mother didn't deny it. "I'm just concerned about you, Emily," she said, her voice softening. "You've worked so hard to get where you are. Don't let someone like him jeopardize everything you've built." Emily stood up, her frustration mounting. "You don't even know him," she said, her voice rising. "Henry is kind, genuine, and he makes me happy. He's not like the people you want me to be with. He's real, Mom. And that's all I need." Her mother looked at her with a mix of concern and disappointment. "I just don't want you to lose sight of what's important," she said quietly. "I don't want you to end up hurt." Emily took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm not going to lose sight of what's important," she said firmly. "And I'm not going to let anyone tell me who I should or shouldn't be with. I love Henry, and that's all that matters." As she left her mother's house, Emily felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. The conversation had left her unsettled, but she knew she had made the right choice. She couldn't let her family's expectations dictate her happiness. And as much as it hurt to see the disappointment in her mother's eyes, Emily knew that she had to follow her heart. Later that evening, Emily met Henry at the park, the place where they had shared so many of their quiet moments. When she saw him, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. He was the one person who made her feel like she could breathe. She walked up to him, smiling softly. "Hey," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "Hey," Henry replied, noticing the change in her demeanor. "What happened?" Emily took a deep breath, her heart still heavy from the conversation with her mother. "I just had a conversation with my mom," she said slowly, "and it didn't go well." Henry looked at her with concern, his eyes softening. "What happened?" he asked gently. Emily paused before speaking, taking his hand in hers. "She doesn't think we belong together," she said quietly. "She thinks I'll get hurt, that I'm making a mistake." Henry's expression darkened slightly. "And what do you think?" Emily smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I think I'm doing what feels right, and that's all I can do." Henry squeezed her hand. "Then I'm with you. All the way." As they stood there, side by side, Emily felt a sense of strength she hadn't realized she had. It was going to be hard. There would always be obstacles, doubts, and people who didn't understand, but she knew, without a doubt, that Henry was worth it. And no matter what came next, they would face it together. The days after Emily's conversation with her mother were filled with an unsettling quiet. The tension between her and her family had reached a boiling point, but it didn't stop her from continuing to see Henry. If anything, it made her more determined to pursue what felt right, even if it meant going against her family's wishes. She knew her mother's concerns came from a place of love, but Emily was tired of living for the expectations of others. She was ready to live for herself, and Henry had become an integral part of that. Despite their growing closeness, the shadow of their differences still loomed. Emily was fully aware that their worlds were different. She had a life of privilege, while Henry had fought for every step he had taken. She often found herself wondering if they could truly make it work. Could their bond survive when the world outside their relationship seemed so disconnected? But whenever she was with him, those worries seemed to fade into the background. Henry, too, had moments of doubt, though he hid them well. He had always thought that the life he had known, the one filled with hardship and struggle, wasn't meant for someone like Emily. She deserved more, deserved someone who could give her the life she had been accustomed to. Yet, every time they were together, Henry felt a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. He had no desire to let her go, but the fear of not being enough for her was always in the back of his mind. It was during one of their quiet evenings together that the subject finally came up again. They had just finished dinner at Emily's apartment and were sitting on the couch, their legs tangled together as they watched a movie. Emily had leaned her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence, and for a moment, she let herself forget everything else. But Henry, ever the thinker, couldn't shake his doubts. He turned to her, his voice low. "Emily," he started, his tone hesitant. "I've been thinking about everything us." She turned her head slightly, looking up at him. "What's on your mind?" "I don't want to keep doubting this," he said, his eyes searching hers. "But sometimes I feel like I don't deserve you. You come from a world I'll never understand, and I'm scared that one day, you'll realize that and walk away." Emily's heart sank as she heard the familiar words of insecurity in his voice. She hated hearing him doubt himself, but she understood where it was coming from. "Henry," she said softly, lifting her hand to gently cup his cheek. "I'm not going anywhere. I've told you this before. I don't care about our differences. I care about you. Who you are. What you make me feel." Henry sighed, his face a mix of frustration and fear. "It's not just about feelings," he muttered. "I'm not the guy who can offer you the things you're used to. The fancy dinners, the events, the world that you live in." Emily smiled gently, brushing her thumb along his jaw. "You think I care about all that?" she asked, her voice full of warmth and sincerity. I don't. I don't need fancy dinners or lavish events to feel valued. All I need is you. That's it." Henry looked at her, the doubt in his eyes slowly melting away as he searched her face for any sign that she was just saying what he wanted to hear. He didn't find it. He only found the truth, her truth, and it made his heart skip a beat. "You really mean that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, her gaze unwavering. More than anything. For a moment, they just sat there, letting the words hang in the air. The weight of their conversation was heavy, but in the silence, Emily could feel a shift. She wasn't going to let him go, and she wasn't going to let his fears drive them apart. She leaned in, pressing her lips gently to his, letting the kiss linger longer than usual, as though to reassure him that she was there, with him, and always would be. When they finally pulled apart, Henry was looking at her with an intensity she hadn't seen before. It was as if, for the first time, he truly believed her. "Okay," he said, his voice steady now. "I'm not going to doubt this anymore." Emily smiled, feeling a weight lift from her chest. She kissed him again, this time with more confidence. "Good," she whispered, her lips brushing against his. "Because this is real, Henry. You and me. Real." The next few days were a whirlwind of new understanding and commitment. Emily and Henry grew closer than ever. They talked about their fears, their goals, and their dreams for the future. And for the first time, both of them felt like they could face whatever came their way, together. But as much as they tried to focus on their relationship, the outside world continued to push against them. Emily's family remained concerned, though they had yet to fully express their disapproval. Her mother had become increasingly distant, and the more Emily tried to reach out, the more she felt the gap widening between them. Her father, on the other hand, seemed indifferent, his only concern being her success and the image of the family. It was clear that Emily's happiness wasn't a priority for them if it didn't fit within their idea of what was best for her. Meanwhile, Henry had begun to feel the weight of their relationship outside of the quiet moments they shared together. He was used to being an outsider, but now, more than ever, he felt like he was living in two different worlds. It wasn't just about fitting in. It was about facing the reality that their connection might one day be tested by forces outside of their control. One afternoon, as they sat in a small park bench, sharing a quiet lunch, Henry looked at Emily, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began, his voice softer now. "About how we'll face things together. And I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, we can make it work." Emily smiled, reaching for his hand. "We can make it work, Henry. I know we can. And in that moment, they both knew that whatever came their way, they were ready to face it, together. The days after Emily and Henry's conversation in the park felt like a new beginning, filled with a quiet sense of hope. Their relationship had grown stronger, but now they were beginning to face challenges that neither of them had anticipated. The weight of Emily's family's expectations continued to hang over her, and Henry's doubts about fitting into her world had not completely disappeared. Still, they were determined to stay together and to navigate the challenges that came their way. Emily's mother, however, was becoming more insistent. Every time they spoke, the same concerns were voiced. Henry wasn't the right person for her, and she was risking her future by pursuing a relationship that was below her station. Emily had never felt more torn. She loved her mother, but she knew that her happiness didn't lie in the life her family had planned for her. One afternoon, after yet another tense conversation with her mother, Emily called Henry. She needed to talk to him, to figure out where they stood. She knew that things couldn't go on like this forever, with the constant pressure from her family and the uncertainty in Henry's heart. When they met later that evening, Emily could sense the weight in Henry's demeanor. He was quiet, his mind clearly elsewhere. She sat across from him at their favorite coffee shop, the dim lights casting a soft glow over their table. "Henry," she said softly, "we need to talk." Henry looked up, his eyes filled with concern. "What's going on, Emily? You seem upset." She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "It's my family," she said. "They're still not happy about us. They think I'm making a mistake, that I'm throwing away everything for someone who doesn't belong in my world." Henry's face tightened, the familiar tension returning. "I knew this was coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure how much longer I can keep pretending that everything's okay. I don't want to be the one who holds you back from the life you deserve." Emily reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "You're not holding me back, Henry. You never have been. The only thing that's holding me back is my family's expectations." Henry stared at her hand, a long pause stretching between them. "But what if they're right?" he asked quietly. "What if I'm not good enough for you?" Emily's heart ached as she heard the vulnerability in his voice. She had always known that his past had shaped him, but hearing him voice his fears made her realize just how deeply they affected him. "Henry, listen to me," she said firmly. "You are more than enough. I don't care about what my family thinks, and I don't care about what society expects. I care about you, the man you are, the man who makes me feel alive. That's all that matters." Henry's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a flicker of doubt in them, but it quickly faded. He squeezed her hand, his voice steady now. "I'm scared, Emily," he admitted. "I've never had a life like yours. I don't even know how to fit in." Emily smiled gently, the corners of her mouth lifting. "You don't need to fit in. You just need to be you. I'm not asking you to change, Henry. I'm asking you to trust that we can make this work, no matter how different our worlds are." The words hung in the air, but Henry could feel the weight of them, the sincerity behind them. Slowly he nodded. "I trust you," he said, his voice low. "I just don't want to mess this up." Emily leaned in, kissing him softly. "You're not going to mess anything up. We're in this together. And together, we can face anything." They sat in silence for a while, the world around them moving at its usual pace, but for Emily and Henry, time seemed to slow. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, they felt like they were truly on the same page. The next few days passed in a blur of work, family tension, and stolen moments together. Emily spent time with Henry, reaffirming their commitment to each other, but the weight of her family's disapproval continued to hang over her. She couldn't escape it. Her mother had made it clear that she would never accept Henry, and her father's indifference made her question whether their relationship was worth sacrificing her family's approval. She had always been the dutiful daughter, but for once, she wondered what would happen if she chose her own happiness over their expectations. One evening, as they were having dinner at her apartment, Emily sat down beside Henry and took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what my family wants," she said, her voice soft but determined. "And I've realized something. I can't keep living my life for them. I have to live it for me. And that means being with you, Henry, no matter what they think." Henry looked at her, his eyes filled with both concern and admiration. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I don't want you to lose your family over me." Emily smiled, a sense of clarity washing over her. "I'm sure. I've spent too much time trying to make everyone else happy. It's time I start making myself happy. And that means being with you. Henry's hand reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I don't know what the future holds, Emily, he said, his voice full of emotion. But I do know that I want to face it with you. Emily leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. For the first time in weeks, she felt like everything was going to be okay. No matter what her family thought, no matter what the world expected, she knew that with Henry by her side, she could face whatever came their way. As they sat there together, the quiet comfort of their shared moment filled the room. The world outside continued to spin, but for Emily and Henry, they had found their place in it. And that was all that mattered. As the days passed, Emily and Henry's relationship continued to grow, but so did the challenges that came with it. Emily had made the decision to prioritize her happiness, but that didn't mean her family had accepted it. Her mother remained distant, and her father showed little concern for her personal life, focusing instead on her success and the expectations that came with it. Emily's heart ached as she tried to bridge the gap between her love for Henry and the family who had always been a central part of her life. But the more time she spent with Henry, the clearer it became to her that the life she wanted wasn't one dictated by her family's standards. It was one where she could be true to herself, and Henry was an essential part of that truth. One evening, after another long day of work, Emily sat in her apartment, looking out the window at the city lights. She had just returned from another strained meeting with her mother. Her mom had made it clear once again that she disapproved of her relationship with Henry, and it was starting to take a toll on Emily. As much as she tried to stand firm, the constant pressure from her family wore her down. Henry, ever the steady presence in her life, noticed the change in her when they met later that night. "What happened?" he asked gently, noticing the tiredness in her eyes. Emily didn't want to burden him with her struggles, but she knew that hiding her feelings from him wouldn't do either of them any good. "It's my mom," she said, her voice soft. "She doesn't understand why I'm with you. She thinks I'm making a mistake." Henry's heart sank as he heard her words. He had always known that Emily's family wouldn't approve, but hearing her say it out loud, seeing the pain in her eyes, made it feel more real. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I never wanted to cause any trouble for you, for your family." Emily shook her head, her frustration rising. "It's not about you, Henry. It's about them. They can't accept the fact that I'm making my own choices, that I'm choosing to live my life for myself instead of for them. I don't want to keep living in their shadow, but I don't know how to get through to them." Henry reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to explain yourself to anyone, Emily. If you're happy with me, that's all that matters. You deserve to live your life the way you want, not the way others think you should." Emily smiled, grateful for his words. But even as she felt comforted by his presence, she couldn't shake the worry that her family's disapproval would always be a lingering shadow over their relationship. "I want to believe that," she said softly. "But it's hard. Every time I talk to my mom, it feels like I'm losing a part of myself, like I'm betraying them for something that might not even last." Henry squeezed her hand, his eyes locking with hers. "I understand, Emily," he said quietly, "but I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, no matter what." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been holding on to so much fear, but in Henry's eyes, she saw nothing but unwavering support. It was a love that was real, that was steady. She wasn't sure how things would play out with her family, but she knew that as long as she had Henry by her side, she could face anything. The next few days were a blur of family obligations, work meetings, and quiet moments with Henry. They continued to meet in secret, finding solace in each other's company. But the weight of Emily's family's disapproval was still there, lurking in the background. One afternoon, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from her mother. It was short and to the point. "We need to talk. Tonight." Emily felt her stomach twist in knots. She had been avoiding this conversation for weeks, but it seemed that her mother wasn't going to give up. She could already imagine what would be said. Still, she knew she couldn't keep running from it. She sent a quick message to Henry, letting him know what was happening. "I'll be there in an hour," she replied. That evening, Emily arrived at her parents' house, her nerves already frayed. Her mother was sitting in the living room, her arms crossed, waiting. Emily took a deep breath before walking in. "Hi, Mom," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Her mother didn't immediately respond. but instead gestured for her to sit down. Emily sat, feeling the weight of the silence between them. Finally, her mother spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about you and Henry," she began, her voice tight. "And I've come to the conclusion that you're making a mistake." Emily's heart sank. She had known this was coming, but hearing the words still stung. "Mom, please," she said, her voice almost pleading. "This isn't just about Henry. It's about me. I'm choosing my own path, and I'm choosing him." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're getting into, Emily. He's not from the same world as us. You're risking your future for someone who can't offer you anything." Emily's hands clenched into fists. She had heard this before, but it still hurt. "I don't want a future based on what you think is best for me. I want a future based on what makes me happy." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Emily thought her mother might say something else. But instead, her mother's expression softened, just a little. "I can't tell you what to do, Emily," she said quietly. "But I just want you to think about what you're giving up. This isn't just about you and Henry. It's about your future, your life." Emily's chest tightened. "I'm thinking about it. And what I'm giving up is the life I've been living for everyone else's sake. It's not about what I'm losing. It's about what I'm gaining." She stood up, looking her mother in the eye. "I love you, Mom. But this is my decision. And I need you to accept that." Her mother didn't say anything else. Emily walked out of the house, her heart heavy, but determined. As she stepped outside, she sent a message to Henry. "I did it. I stood up for us." A few minutes later, Henry replied, "I'm proud of you, Emily. I'll always be here for you." She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that whatever it was, they would face it together. And that was enough. After the conversation with her mother, Emily felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. For the first time in her life, she had chosen her own happiness over the expectations placed on her by her family. It was a decision that brought her peace, but also made her feel a little more isolated. She knew her relationship with Henry was going to face challenges, especially when her family would not accept him. Still, in her heart, Emily knew she had made the right choice. Henry, too, had been there for her every step of the way, supporting her decisions even when he knew it wasn't easy. As the days went by, Emily felt her connection with Henry growing even deeper. They spent more time together, just enjoying the quiet moments, away from the noise of their separate worlds. They would often take walks in the park, have late-night dinners, and talk about their hopes and dreams. For Emily, it felt like she was finally living the life she had always wanted. Yet, the pressure from her family was never far behind. Every time she spoke to her mother, there was an undertone of disappointment, a reminder that Emily was straying from the path her family had envisioned for her. Her father's indifference hurt just as much, but she refused to let that define her. She had Henry now, and together, they were finding their own way. One evening, as the two of them were sitting at a small cafe in the city, Henry looked at Emily, his expression serious. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low. Emily looked up from her coffee, her heart skipping a beat. "About what?" "About us," he said, his gaze steady. "I know things haven't been easy, and I don't want you to think I'm not committed to this, to you. But sometimes I feel like I'm holding you back." Emily frowned, her heart tightening at his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft. "I mean, you deserve a life that's more than just struggling to make ends meet," Henry explained. "You deserve someone who can give you everything that's out of my reach. I want to make this work, Emily, but I'm scared that one day, you'll wake up and realize that you could have had so much more." Emily shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. "Henry, listen to me," she said firmly. "I don't need anyone to give me anything. I don't want a life of luxury. I want a life with you. That's all that matters to me." Henry looked at her, his expression softening. He knew she meant it, but his insecurities still lingered. "But I don't want you to feel like you're settling," he said quietly. Emily reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "I'm not settling, Henry," she said with conviction. "You make me feel more alive than I've ever felt. I don't need the fancy dinners, the events, or the big house. I just need you." Henry squeezed her hand, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emily smiled, her heart full. "I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of their conversation settle. Between them, Emily could see the doubt still in his eyes, but she could also see the flicker of hope. For the first time, Henry seemed to believe in the possibility of a future together, despite all their differences. As they left the cafe, hand in hand, Emily felt a quiet strength in their bond. They may not have had everything figured out, but for the first time, it didn't matter. They were facing the future together, and that was enough. The next few days brought their own set of challenges. Emily's work schedule became more demanding, and Henry's part-time job at the warehouse had begun to take up more of his time. They couldn't see each other as often as they had before, and the absence of their quiet moments together started to make Emily realize just how much she had come to depend on him. It wasn't just about love, it was about the sense of peace and belonging he gave her. But as much as Emily missed Henry, she knew that they had to make time for their relationship, no matter how busy life got. One evening, after a long day at work, Emily found herself at a crossroads. Her mother had called earlier in the day, demanding that they meet again. She had tried to avoid it, but she knew that the conversation was inevitable. This time, however, she had a different perspective. She wasn't going to apologize for her choices. She wasn't going to apologize for loving Henry. As she walked into her mother's house later that evening, she felt a sense of resolve she hadn't felt before. "Emily," her mother said as she entered the living room, her expression a mixture of frustration and concern. "We need to talk. This has gone on long enough." Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "What is it, Mom?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "You can't keep pretending that everything is fine," her mother said, her voice tight. "You're throwing away your future for someone who isn't even on the same level as you." Emily shook her head, her heart racing with the familiar sense of anger and frustration. "You don't understand, Mom. It's not about status or level. It's about love. It's about choosing the person who makes me feel whole, not the one who fits your ideal of what's best for me." Her mother sighed, her face softening slightly. "I just don't want you to get hurt. You've worked so hard to get where you are." Emily's resolve only grew stronger. "And I've realized that no amount of success or wealth can replace the happiness I feel when I'm with Henry. He makes me feel like I'm finally living my life for myself." For a long moment, her mother didn't speak. Emily stood her ground, letting the silence speak for itself. She wasn't going to let her mother's disapproval define her anymore. "I'm not asking you to understand, Mom," she said quietly. "I'm just asking you to accept my decision." Her mother didn't reply immediately, but Emily could see the conflict in her eyes. Emily knew that this conversation wasn't going to end the way she hoped, but she also knew that she had to stay true to herself. As she left her mother's house, she felt a sense of liberation. She had made her choice, and no matter what happened next, she was going to live her life for herself, with Henry by her side. They would face whatever came their way together. The days after Emily's conversation with her mother were filled with both relief and uncertainty. Emily had finally spoken her truth, but she knew that her family's approval wasn't something she could easily win back. Her mother's disappointment lingered, but Emily was resolute. She loved Henry, and that was more important than anything her family could offer. The weight of her mother's disapproval still hung over her, but she knew she couldn't go back. She had chosen her own happiness, and Henry had stood by her, unwavering, every step of the way. It was a quiet evening when Emily returned to her apartment, feeling the pressure of the world on her shoulders, but also a sense of clarity she hadn't felt before. The path she had taken wasn't easy, but it was hers. Henry was there waiting for her, sitting on the couch, his eyes soft with concern. He could tell something had shifted in her since her conversation with her mother, but he didn't know what to say. Emily walked over and sat beside him, her heart heavy, but her resolve stronger than ever. "I told her, Henry," she said quietly, her voice tinged with a mix of sadness and strength. "I told her. I can't live for her anymore. I can't keep pretending that I don't know what makes me happy." Henry looked at her, his heart swelling with admiration. "And what makes you happy, Emily?" She smiled faintly, taking his hand in hers. "You, Henry. It's always been you." Henry's eyes softened as he heard her words. He had always known that Emily was a force to be reckoned with, but hearing her say that she was choosing him over everything else made his heart ache with tenderness. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm here for you. Always." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm glad," she whispered. "Because I need you." They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the city outside filtering in through the windows. Emily leaned her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling his steady presence beside her. It was moments like these that reminded her why she had fought so hard for their relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Henry had his own struggles, his own insecurities, but Emily knew that they could face them together. The next few days felt like a whirlwind of emotions. Emily continued to focus on her work, trying to keep herself distracted from the tension with her family. But the distance between her and her mother seemed to grow wider with every passing day. Emily missed her mother, but she couldn't keep living in her shadow. She needed to follow her own path. One evening, after another stressful day, Emily sat in the park alone, thinking about everything that had happened. She looked up at the stars above, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had lost so much in the pursuit of her own happiness, but she couldn't help but wonder if it was all worth it. Hey! A familiar voice broke through her thoughts. Emily looked up to see Henry walking toward her, his smile soft but warm. "You okay?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Emily smiled weakly. "I'm just thinking about everything." Henry nodded, his gaze gentle. "I know it's been hard, but you've done the right thing, Emily. You've chosen what's best for you, and I'm proud of you." Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you," she said quietly. Henry reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to do it alone," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You've got me. Always." Emily leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. "I'm so lucky to have you," she whispered. "And I'll never take you for granted." Henry's heart fluttered as he looked at her, his eyes full of tenderness. "I'll never take you for granted either," he said softly. "We're in this together." As they sat there, side by side, the world seemed to fade away. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt at peace. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that as long as she had Henry by her side, they could face anything. Over the next few weeks, their relationship grew even stronger. Emily's family remained distant, but she had come to terms with the fact that they might never fully accept her choices. Henry's love for her was more than enough to fill the void left by their disapproval. Emily began to realize that she didn't need her family's approval to be happy. She had Henry, and that was all she needed. As the days passed, Emily and Henry continued to build their life together. There were challenges, of course, there always would be, but they faced them with a strength and unity that Emily had never known before. She began to feel more confident in her decisions, more sure of the life she was building with Henry. And Henry, too, had started to believe in himself. With Emily's love and support, he began to see that he was worthy of the life they were creating. It wasn't just about the grand gestures or the material things. It was about the quiet moments, the shared laughter, and the deep understanding between them. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Emily looked at Henry, her heart full. "You know," she said, "I used to think I needed everything to be perfect. I thought I had to follow the path that was laid out for me. But now I realize that the only thing that matters is being true to myself. And being with you." Henry smiled, his heart swelling with love for her. "I feel the same way," he said softly. "We've got everything we need right here, Emily." Emily leaned in, kissing him softly. She didn't need anything else. With Henry by her side, she had everything she could ever want. Together, they would face whatever came their way. They were ready for the future, whatever it might hold. The weeks that followed were filled with both peaceful moments and growing tensions, but Emily and Henry had found a rhythm, learning to navigate the complexities of their lives together. Emily's resolve to live her own truth was stronger than ever, but she couldn't escape the undercurrent of disapproval from her family. Her mother had distanced herself, though Emily had refused to let that affect her relationship with Henry. She was determined to live for herself, not for her parents' approval. As the days passed, Emily continued to grow in confidence. She felt more at ease with the decision she had made. She had Henry, and that was enough. Yet, the pressure from her family continued to loom over her. Her mother's occasional messages, filled with concern and disappointment, reminded her of the gulf between their worlds. And as much as she tried to block it out, there were moments when she felt the weight of that disconnection. On one such evening, after yet another tense phone call with her mother, Emily found herself sitting with Henry in their favorite cafe. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows on the table, but Emily's thoughts were far from peaceful. She had hoped that her relationship with her mother would ease over time, but it seemed to be only growing more strained. She stared at her coffee, not sure where to begin. Henry, as always, noticed the shift in her mood. "You okay?" he asked softly, his hand gently brushing hers. Emily looked up, meeting his gaze. She didn't want to burden him with her frustrations, but at the same time, she knew that hiding her feelings from him wasn't fair. "It's my mom," she admitted, her voice quiet. "She's still not accepting me, not accepting us. It's like no matter what I do, I can't make her understand." Henry's expression softened, and he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said sincerely. "I never wanted to be the cause of this." Emily shook her head, squeezing his hand. "No, Henry. It's not you. It's me. I thought that with time, things would get better. But now I feel like I'm losing my family. And for what? I don't know if I can keep carrying this weight." Henry's heart ached for her, for the pain she was carrying. He knew how important her family was to her, and seeing her torn between her love for him and her loyalty to them made him feel helpless. "You don't have to carry it alone," he said, his voice full of warmth. "I'm here always. And whatever happens, we'll face it together. You're not losing me, Emily. You're gaining something more, your own life. I think that's worth fighting for." Emily looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and sadness in her eyes. "But what if it's not enough?" she asked quietly. "What if the life I'm building with you can't make up for the family I've always had?" Henry squeezed her hand. "You have me," he said firmly. "And you're not the only one who's had to make difficult choices. We both knew what we were getting into. I've been living with the fear of not being enough for you. But you've made it clear that that's not what matters. It's about us, and how we make each other better. And that's more than enough for me." Emily felt the weight in her chest ease slightly as she listened to his words. She knew he was right. She had been holding on to the idea of family approval for so long, but she was slowly starting to realize that her life, her happiness, couldn't be defined by their expectations. "I've spent so much of my life trying to please everyone," she said, her voice steady. "But now, I want to live for me. I want to live for us." Henry smiled, his thumb brushing over her hand. "Then let's do that," he said softly. "Let's build our future, together." As they left the cafe, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and she knew that her family's disapproval wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, she felt truly at peace with the decision she had made. She had Henry, and together, they were building something real. Over the next few weeks, Emily focused on strengthening her relationship with Henry. They spent more time together, away from the pressure of their separate worlds. Their connection deepened, and Emily found herself falling even more in love with him. He had become her anchor, her constant, and she realized that she could never go back to the life she had before. One evening, as they sat in Henry's small apartment, Emily felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had spent so much of her life trying to meet other people's expectations, but now, she was living her own truth. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. And that, to Emily, was everything. "I'm glad we're doing this," she said quietly, looking up at Henry. "I'm glad we're doing this together." Henry smiled, reaching out to touch her cheek. "Me too," he said softly. "I've never felt more sure of anything in my life." Emily leaned in, pressing her lips to his. She knew that their journey was just beginning, but she was ready for whatever came next. As they sat there, side by side, Emily realized that this was the life she had always wanted. One where she could be herself, where love wasn't about meeting others' expectations, but about sharing her heart with someone who truly understood her. Henry had shown her that, and she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Emily stood at the window, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled below, a sea of gold stretching into the horizon. She had spent so many years focusing on the expectations of others, trying to live up to a life that was never truly hers. Now, for the first time, she was living on her own terms, with Henry by her side. The thought made her heart swell with a quiet sense of peace. Despite the tension with her family and the uncertain future ahead, Emily knew she had made the right choice. Henry had become her anchor, her constant in a world that often felt overwhelming. She had let go of the need for her family's approval and was now free to follow her heart. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced down at the screen. It was a message from Henry. "How about dinner tonight? Just us. No distractions. We've earned it." Emily smiled, her heart lifting at the thought of spending the evening with him. It had been a busy week for both of them, and they hadn't had much time to connect outside of their hectic schedules. Sounds perfect, she texted back. I'll pick the place. Can't wait. She set her phone down, feeling a sense of excitement build within her. As much as she loved spending time with Henry, she had come to appreciate the little moments, the quiet evenings spent talking, laughing, and simply being in each other's company. Later that evening, Emily and Henry met at a small Italian restaurant in the city, one they had discovered together during one of their early dates. The familiar ambience welcomed them, the soft hum of conversation and clinking glasses setting the tone for a relaxing evening. Emily sat down across from Henry, her smile wide. I'm so glad we're doing this, she said, her voice filled with warmth. Henry grinned, his eyes lighting up. Me too. I feel like we've both been running on empty lately. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. But right now it's just us. No outside pressures, no distractions. Emily squeezed his hand, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. She hadn't realized how much she needed this moment, this time to just be with him, away from everything else. As the evening unfolded, they talked about everything and nothing. They shared stories about their childhoods, their hopes for the future, and the little things that made their lives unique. Emily realized how much she had grown in the time they had been together. Henry had helped her open up, to see the world through a different lens. For the first time, she felt like she was living authentically, free from the constraints of others' expectations. The waiter brought their meals, and they continued to enjoy the quiet comfort of each other's company. As they ate, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The road hadn't been easy, but it had led them here, to this moment of peace and contentment. She had once feared that their differences would tear them apart, but instead, it had only brought them closer. They had found a way to make their worlds mesh, to build a future that worked for both of them. After dinner, they took a walk through the city, the cool evening air brushing against their skin. Emily tucked her arm into Henry's, leaning into him. For the first time in a long time, she felt at home. As they walked in silence, just enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's presence, Emily felt a sense of certainty settle in her heart. She had made the right choice. Henry was the one she wanted to build a life with, no matter the challenges they might face along the way. They were strong enough to overcome anything. When they reached a quiet bench in the park, Henry turned to her, his eyes soft with affection. Emily, I want you to know something, he said, his voice serious but filled with tenderness. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I love you. Emily felt her heart swell in her chest. She had always known how much he cared for her, but hearing those words again, after everything they had been through, made her feel even more secure in their bond. I love you too, Henry, she said, her voice filled with emotion. And I believe in us. I believe in what we're building. Henry smiled, pulling her into a gentle hug. Emily nestled against him, feeling safe and loved. She knew that their journey wasn't going to be without its obstacles, but for the first time, she was ready to face whatever came their way. They had built something real, something that could withstand anything the world threw at them. As they sat there, the world around them fading into the background, Emily realized that this was exactly where she was meant to be. With Henry by her side, she felt like she could take on anything. She wasn't bound by her family's expectations anymore. She was living for herself, for the love they had built. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid of what the future held. She knew they would make it work, no matter what. Henry gently pulled away from the hug, holding her hands in his. So, what's next for us? He asked, his eyes filled with curiosity. Emily looked out at the city, the lights shimmering in the distance, and then back at Henry. We keep moving forward, she said softly, her voice filled with confidence. Together. And in that moment, Emily knew that no matter what happened, they would always find their way back to each other. Together, they had everything they needed. And that was more than enough. As the weeks passed, Emily and Henry's bond continued to strengthen, but the weight of her family's disapproval remained. Emily had made peace with her decision, but the strain between her and her family lingered. Every time she spoke to her mother, she could sense the distance between them growing wider. Her mother, who had once been the center of her world, now seemed like a shadow of the person Emily had known. It was painful, but Emily couldn't bring herself to regret the choice she had made. She had chosen Henry, and that decision, though difficult, felt more right with each passing day. One evening, after another difficult phone call with her mother, Emily sat in her apartment, staring out at the skyline. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, a mixture of frustration, sadness, and relief. She loved her family, but she couldn't continue living her life trying to please them. She had to live for herself. As she sat there lost in thought, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Henry. "How about a weekend getaway? Just the two of us. No stress, no worries. I think we both need a break." Emily smiled at the message. It was just what she needed. A chance to escape, even for a little while, and focus on what truly mattered. She quickly replied, "Yes. Let's do it. I need this." The weekend arrived, and Emily and Henry found themselves in a quiet little cabin by the lake, far from the chaos of the city. The rustic charm of the place, surrounded by trees and the sound of the water, was the perfect escape. Emily could already feel the tension in her shoulders begin to ease as they settled in. Henry had always known how to make her feel at ease, and this weekend was no exception. They spent their days hiking through the woods, exploring the area, and cooking simple meals together. The quiet serenity of the lake brought them both a sense of peace that they hadn't realized they'd been missing. For once, there were no expectations, no pressures. It was just the two of them, and that felt like everything. On their second evening at the cabin, after a day spent by the water, they sat on the porch with mugs of hot tea, watching the sun set behind the trees. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the cool evening breeze rustled through the leaves. Emily leaned against Henry, feeling the warmth of his body beside hers. "This is perfect," she said, her voice soft. Henry smiled and nodded, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I'm glad you think so," he replied, his voice low and comforting. "I know things haven't been easy, but I think we're getting to a place where it's just us, where we can focus on what really matters." Emily took a deep breath, letting the calmness of the moment settle in her chest. "I've been thinking about that too," she said quietly. "I've spent so much of my life worrying about what everyone else thinks, what my family expects of me. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can finally breathe, like I'm not bound by anything anymore." Henry kissed the top of her head, his fingers gently tracing circles on her arm. "You don't have to worry about that anymore, Emily," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "You don't owe anyone anything, not when it comes to your happiness. I'm here, and that's what matters." Emily looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for always being here, for believing in us even when I wasn't sure. I'm so lucky to have you." Henry smiled, his eyes soft. "I'm the lucky one," he said. "You've shown me what it means to live for something real, to love without fear. You've made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserve this." Emily's heart ached with love for him. She had always known how special Henry was, but hearing him express his feelings like this made her realize just how far they had come. They had both fought their own battles, but now, they were fighting for each other. That was something she had never experienced before. As the evening wore on, they sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of nature around them. The flickering lights of the cabin and the warmth of the fire inside made the moment feel even more intimate, like a world of their own. Emily rested her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling a sense of peace that she had never known. For the first time in a long time, she felt like everything was as it should be. She didn't need her family's approval. She didn't need anything except Henry, the person who had shown her what it meant to live authentically, to love without reservations. "Do you ever think about the future?" Emily asked softly, breaking the silence. Henry paused for a moment before answering, his voice steady and calm. "I think about it all the time. I think about you, about us, about what we want to build together. I'm not sure what it will look like, but I know I want you in it. No matter what comes, I want to face it with you." Emily smiled, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to build it with you too." The rest of the evening passed in a quiet, contented blur. They talked about their dreams, their plans, and the future they hoped to create. It was a far cry from the uncertainty that had clouded their past. Now, they had each other, and that was more than enough. The weekend getaway turned out to be just what they both needed. It had given them the space to reconnect, to strengthen the bond that had been tested by so many challenges. As they packed up to leave, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it, hand in hand with Henry. Together, they were ready for whatever came next. The weeks after their weekend getaway felt like a new chapter for Emily and Henry. The space they had taken to reconnect had given them both a sense of clarity and peace. But life, as it often did, began to pull them back into its demanding rhythm. Emily's work responsibilities continued to increase, with new projects on the horizon and pressure from the board of directors mounting as they pushed for even more expansion of the company. Henry, too, had his own struggles, balancing his part-time job with his desire to move forward in his career. Yet, despite the challenges, they both felt an undeniable shift. They had found a way to prioritize each other, and that made all the difference. One evening, after a long day, Emily and Henry sat together on the couch in her apartment. The dim light from the table lamp flickered, casting a warm glow over the room. Henry was stretched out next to Emily, his head resting on her lap as she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through his hair. The simple act of being together, without any expectations or obligations, felt like a rare and cherished moment. "You know, I've been thinking," Henry said, his voice low and thoughtful. Emily looked down at him, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "About what?" "About how lucky we are," he said, turning his head to meet her gaze. "I know things haven't been easy, but I feel like we've come so far. It's not just about the love we share, it's the way we've built something real, something solid." Emily's heart swelled as she listened to him. She had been thinking the same thing. Despite the obstacles they faced, the uncertainty that loomed over their relationship, they had created something genuine. It wasn't always perfect, but it was real, and that meant everything. "I feel the same way," she said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "When I look at you, Henry, I don't see the man who's been through so much. I see the man who's stood by me, who's been my constant in a world that's always changing. You make me feel like I can be myself, no matter what." Henry smiled up at her, his eyes soft and filled with emotion. "You've done the same for me," he said quietly. "You've made me believe that maybe I deserve more than just getting by. You've shown me that I can dream, that I can build a life, and that life can be with you." Emily's throat tightened as she heard his words. She hadn't realized how much she had helped him see his own worth. So often, they focused on the challenges, the struggles that seemed to stand in their way. But in this moment, they both saw the progress they had made. They had built something together, something that neither of them had ever expected, but something that felt incredibly real. As the evening continued, they talked about their future, not in grandiose terms, but in simple, everyday moments. They talked about buying a house together, maybe getting a dog, and how they wanted to travel more, see the world beyond the confines of their everyday lives. It wasn't about the material things, it was about the life they could share. The more they talked, the clearer it became that they were building something sustainable, something that didn't rely on outside validation. They had each other, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, Emily's relationship with her family continued to be strained. Her mother had reached out once or twice, but each conversation felt more like an interrogation than an attempt at reconciliation. Emily could sense that her mother was still disappointed, still struggling with her choice to be with Henry. But Emily had made her peace with it. She no longer felt the need to explain herself. She had Henry, and that was what mattered most. One afternoon, after another tense exchange with her mother, Emily found herself sitting alone in her office, staring out the window at the city below. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. Despite the progress she had made, the struggle with her family still left her feeling drained. She had spent so many years trying to meet their expectations, and now, letting go of that had been harder than she had thought. She picked up her phone and sent Henry a quick message. "Can we meet tonight? I need to talk." He replied almost immediately, his response is simple. "Of course. I'll be there." That night, they met at a quiet park bench near the lake, the air cool but refreshing. The sound of the water lapping against the shore was soothing, and for a moment, Emily felt a calm she hadn't experienced in a while. Henry sat next to her, his presence offering her the comfort she needed. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice soft and concerned. Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping as she leaned back. "It's my mom again," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't keep trying to explain myself to her. I don't know what to do anymore. She just doesn't get it, and I'm starting to wonder if she ever will." Henry turned to face her, his eyes filled with understanding. Emily, I know how much you love her, but you can't keep carrying the weight of her disappointment. You've made the decision that's right for you, and I'm proud of you for that. But it's okay to let go of the need for her approval. You can still love her without sacrificing your own happiness. Emily looked at him, his words sinking deep into her heart. She had been so focused on her family's disapproval that she had forgotten how much she had already accomplished on her own. She had chosen Henry because he made her feel like she could be her true self. And that, she realized, was something no one else could give her. You're right, she said quietly, her voice steady now. I don't need her approval anymore. I just need to focus on the life I'm building with you. And I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me. Henry smiled, his hand reaching out to gently take hers. I'm with you, he said softly. We're in this together, Emily. Emily squeezed his hand, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as long as they had each other, she knew they could face anything. Together, they were stronger than any obstacle that might come their way. The weeks that followed Emily and Henry's heart-to-heart conversation in the park brought a sense of calm to their lives. They had both made the decision to let go of the expectations of others, particularly her family's disapproval. But while Emily had found peace in her relationship with Henry, the reality of navigating their future together remained a constant challenge. Emily's professional life was growing ever more demanding. With her company expanding, she was thrust into even more high-stakes meetings and leadership decisions. Her role was becoming increasingly difficult to balance with the personal life she was building with Henry. But Emily had learned to manage both. She knew what mattered most, her future with Henry. The more time they spent together, the more their connection deepened. Every moment with him felt like a reaffirmation of the choices she had made. Despite her family's continued distance, she felt supported by the love and stability Henry brought into her life. One afternoon, Emily returned home after a long day of meetings. She was physically drained but emotionally full, knowing she would be seeing Henry soon. They had planned a quiet evening together, a night to unwind and recharge. She entered her apartment and immediately felt the warm, welcoming atmosphere of the space she had made her own. Henry had already arrived and was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Emily smiled, watching him from the doorway. You know, I could really get used to this, she said playfully. Henry turned around, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. I thought you might like it, he replied. It's the least I can do for someone who works so hard. Emily walked over and wrapped her arms around him, feeling the tension in her shoulders slowly ease as he returned the embrace. You're always so thoughtful, she murmured. I don't think I could do this without you. Henry looked down at her, his expression serious but soft. I mean it, Emily. I'm here always. No matter what happens, we're in this together. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sincerity of his words sink in. They had both learned to overcome their doubts, their fears, and had chosen each other. She realized that their love wasn't just about romantic gestures or grand declarations. It was built on the everyday support they gave each other. As the evening wore on, they ate dinner together, discussing everything from the future to the small details of their day-to-day lives. It felt normal, comforting, and real. It was exactly what they both needed. As they cleaned up after the meal, Henry glanced at Emily, his eyes filled with something deeper than just affection. You know, I've been thinking about something, he said quietly. Emily paused, sensing the shift in the conversation. What's that? She asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Henry took a deep breath. I've been thinking about us, about the future. And I know it's not going to be easy, but I want to make it work. I don't want us to just exist in this bubble we've created. I want to build a life with you, a life that's not just about surviving, but really living. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she heard the depth of his words. She had always known that Henry was someone who was deeply reflective, but hearing him express his desire for a future together made her realize just how much they had grown. I want that too, she replied softly, her voice steady but full of emotion. I want to build a life with you. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we have to make the choice to keep going, to keep fighting for us. Henry smiled, his eyes brightening as he reached for her hand. We'll take it one step at a time. Together. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Emily's company reached new milestones, and she found herself busier than ever. But no matter how hectic things got, She and Henry always made time for each other. They had learned that the key to making their relationship work wasn't just about overcoming the external challenges. It was about the little moments of connection they shared. Emily found herself looking forward to their quiet evenings more than anything else. They didn't need grand plans or big gestures. It was the simple act of being together that made their bond so strong. But as much as Emily had come to accept the distance between her and her family, a part of her still longed for their approval. She had made her peace with the fact that they might never fully accept Henry, but it didn't make the reality any easier to accept. One day, after a particularly tense phone call with her mother, Emily found herself sitting at her desk, feeling the weight of the world pressed down on her. She had tried to make things work with her family, but no matter what she did, it seemed like they just couldn't understand her choices. She had made the decision to be with Henry, and while it had brought her so much happiness, it had also created a rift that she didn't know how to bridge. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Henry. "How about a night in? I'll make dinner, and we can just relax." Emily smiled at the simplicity of his message. It was exactly what she needed. "I'll be home soon," she replied. "Sounds perfect." When she arrived at their apartment, the aroma of dinner greeted her, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. No matter what else was going on in her life, she had Henry. They spent the evening in quiet contentment, talking, laughing, and simply being together. Emily realized, in that moment, that she had everything she needed. She had love, she had Henry, and together, they were building something real. As they sat on the couch later that evening, Emily felt her heart full of gratitude. "You know," she said softly, "I don't need anything else. As long as I have you, I'm happy." Henry looked at her, his eyes filled with love. "I feel the same way," he replied. "We've got each other, and that's more than enough." In that moment, Emily knew that no matter what came next, they were ready. Together, they could handle anything the world threw their way. As the months passed, Emily and Henry's relationship only deepened. The challenges of navigating a life filled with the demands of her career and the distance from her family were far from over. But Emily felt stronger with each passing day. She had made her choice, and although the road wasn't easy, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Their connection had grown beyond just love. It was a partnership built on trust, mutual respect, and the understanding that they would face whatever came their way together. Emily's work had been particularly challenging lately, with new responsibilities piling on top of the old ones. The pressure from her job, the constant need to perform, and the ever-growing list of tasks weighed on her. But through it all, Henry remained her steady anchor. No matter how busy she got, he was there for her, supporting her without hesitation. He had become her biggest cheerleader, always encouraging her to keep going when things felt overwhelming. One evening, after a particularly taxing day at work, Emily arrived home late, exhausted and emotionally drained. She had been in meetings all day, discussing numbers, projections, and strategy for the company. It was important work, but it felt so far removed from the things that really mattered to her. As she stepped inside the apartment, the soft light from the lamp in the living room welcomed her, and the smell of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. Henry was there, cooking dinner as he always did when he knew she had had a rough day. Emily smiled to herself, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't need grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was the little things, like this, that meant the most. She walked into the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "I don't deserve you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Henry turned around, smiling at her. "You don't have to deserve anything, Emily," he said, his voice low and comforting. "I'm here because I want to be. You mean everything to me." Emily rested her forehead against his chest, letting the simplicity of the moment sink in. She felt like she could finally breathe. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Henry kissed the top of her head. "You'll never have to find out," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I'm with you, no matter what." After dinner, they sat together on the couch, watching a movie. The familiar comfort of Henry's presence made the stress of her day fade into the background. As they sat there, Emily reflected on how far they had come. She had once been consumed by the pressures of her family and career, unsure of how to balance the two. But now, with Henry by her side, she had found a way to create her own path. She no longer felt the need to explain herself to anyone. She had made the difficult choice to be with him. and in doing so, she had chosen her own happiness. It wasn't easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but Emily was ready to face them. Henry had shown her that love wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for each other, even in the messy, complicated moments. They had learned how to communicate, how to support each other through the highs and lows, and most importantly, how to be true to themselves. The next few weeks brought even more opportunities for growth. Emily received a promotion at work, a recognition of her hard work and dedication. It was a proud moment for her, but it also came with even more responsibility. She found herself balancing her time even more carefully, making sure she was giving her best to both her career and her relationship. Henry continued to support her every step of the way, encouraging her to chase her dreams while also reminding her to take care of herself. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Emily looked at him, her heart full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Henry smiled, his eyes soft. "You did it, Emily. You've always been capable. I just helped you see it." Emily smiled back, feeling a lump form in her throat. She knew that her success wasn't just her own. It was the result of the love and support she had received from Henry. He had been there when she needed someone to lean on, when she doubted herself, and when she just needed a reminder that she was enough. As the days went by, Emily and Henry continued to grow together. They made plans for their future, dreaming about the possibilities ahead. They talked about moving to a new city, about buying a home, and about what kind of life they wanted to build. But through it all, Emily knew one thing for sure. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need her family's approval or anyone else's validation. All she needed was Henry, the person who had shown her what it meant to live authentically and love without reservation. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of peace. "I'm so happy," she whispered, almost to herself. Henry turned to her, a soft smile on his face. "Me too," he said quietly. "This is everything." Emily looked at him, her heart full. "I used to think I needed everything to be perfect," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But now I realize that this, us, is all I really need." Henry squeezed her hand, his expression tender. "And I feel the same way. We're enough. Together, we're enough." In that moment, Emily realized that her journey had led her to this place, and she wouldn't change a thing. She had Henry, the love of her life, and together, they would face whatever the future held. Their love was a testament to the power of choice, of standing up for what you believe in, and the courage to build a life that was true to who they were. And as they sat there, side by side, Emily knew that no matter what came next, they would always find their way back to each other. Because together, they had everything they needed. As time passed, Emily and Henry found themselves moving forward in their relationship, each step filled with a deeper sense of connection and understanding. The challenges they faced, from the pressure of Emily's work to the ongoing distance from her family, had tested them both, but they had emerged stronger together. They had found a way to balance their lives, even if it meant facing difficult conversations and moments of doubt. Emily's success at work continued to grow, and with it came more responsibilities. The demands of her role sometimes took her away from Henry, but she knew that the balance they had worked so hard to create had become a vital part of their relationship. Even in the midst of her hectic schedule, she always made time for him, knowing that it was the small, quiet moments that kept their connection alive. Henry, too, had grown more confident in their relationship. In the early days, he had struggled with feelings of inadequacy, unsure if he could truly offer Emily the life she deserved. But through their conversations, the quiet support, and the unwavering trust they had built, Henry began to see that their love wasn't about perfection or material success. It was about understanding, partnership, and mutual respect. They spent the next few months settling into a routine, but it wasn't without its ups and downs. Emily's family remained distant, her mother's disapproval still weighing heavily on her. Yet, every time Emily thought about reaching out to her mother, she was reminded of the decision she had made. Her happiness, her peace, had come from embracing her choice to be with Henry, and nothing would take that away from her. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, Emily sat down at the kitchen table, feeling the exhaustion in her bones. The tension in her shoulders, the constant pressure to succeed, had started to take its toll. As she stared down at her phone, she saw Henry's name light up the screen. He had sent a simple text. "How about we cook together tonight? I'll take care of dinner. We could just relax." Emily smiled, feeling a rush of warmth. No matter what was going on in her life, Henry's thoughtfulness always seemed to make everything better. She quickly responded, "That sounds perfect. I'll be home soon." When Emily arrived, the familiar scent of a home-cooked meal greeted her. Henry had already begun preparing dinner, the kitchen filled with the comforting sounds of sizzling and chopping. She walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You always know how to make everything feel better," she said softly. Henry turned to face her, a warm smile spreading across his face. "I know you've been stressed. I figured we could have a quiet night in, just the two of us. You've been carrying so much lately." Emily nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I just want to make everything work," she admitted, her voice heavy with the weight of unspoken fears. "I want to be successful, but I don't want to lose us in the process." Henry reached out and cupped her cheek gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to do it alone, Emily. We've been through so much already, and we'll keep moving forward, together. Your success doesn't change who we are or what we've built." Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She had always felt the pressure to excel, to make her family proud, but in that moment, she realized that what mattered most was the life they were building together. It wasn't about how much they achieved or how others perceived them. It was about the love and connection they shared. As they sat down to dinner, the conversation turned to their future. They spoke about their hopes, their dreams, and the adventures they wanted to experience together. Emily had always been focused on what she needed to do to achieve success, but now, she was learning to think about what kind of life she wanted to create with Henry. They spoke of a future where they could travel, explore new places, and continue building their lives side by side. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt a deep sense of peace settle in her chest. She didn't have to have all the answers. She didn't need to know exactly what the future held. All she needed was Henry by her side. Later that night, as they cleaned up together, Henry looked at her with a smile. "You know," he said softly, "I've been thinking about us too, and I realized something." Emily raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I'm not scared anymore," he said, his voice calm but filled with certainty. "I know we've had our doubts and faced some challenges, but I'm not scared of the future anymore. I'm ready for whatever comes our way." Emily felt her heart swell as she heard his words. "Me neither," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm ready too." The following days brought new opportunities and new challenges, but Emily and Henry faced them together. They continued to support each other in ways that felt natural and true, without needing grand gestures or elaborate promises. They had found something real, something that could withstand the pressures of their individual lives. As the weeks turned into months, Emily realized that the future she had once feared was no longer an obstacle. It was an opportunity, one that she was ready to face with Henry. They were in this together, and that was all they needed. No matter where life took them, they would navigate it hand in hand. With each passing day, Emily knew that her choice to be with Henry had been the best decision she had ever made. They had built a love that was strong, steady, and unshakable, and that was something that no external pressure or obstacle could take away. Together, they were unstoppable. As the seasons changed, so did the depth of Emily and Henry's bond. They had weathered storms, faced doubts, and fought for what they believed in. But now, they were in a place where their love was not just something they hoped would work. It was a part of who they were, a foundation they could build upon for the rest of their lives. Their commitment to each other had only grown stronger with time. Every day, they found new ways to nurture their connection, to make each other's lives richer. Emily's work continued to thrive, but she had found a balance. She wasn't defined by her job anymore. Her happiness came from her relationship with Henry, from the quiet moments they shared, and from the knowledge that they had created a life that was uniquely their own. Henry had flourished as well. He no longer felt the insecurities that had once plagued him. He had come to understand that his worth was not tied to his past or to the life he thought he should have. It was tied to the love he gave and received, and to the life he was building with Emily. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, Emily rested her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence. It was a rare moment of quiet in a world that often demanded so much from both of them. She had learned that it wasn't about perfection. It was about being with someone who accepted you completely, someone who made the messy parts of life feel manageable. And with Henry, that was exactly what she had found. You know, Emily said softly, her voice barely a whisper, I used to think that everything had to be perfect, that I had to follow a specific path to find happiness. Henry looked down at her, a gentle smile playing on his lips. And now, he asked. Emily lifted her head to meet his gaze. Now I realize that it's the imperfections that make everything beautiful. We don't need to have it all figured out. As long as we have each other, that's enough. Henry's smile deepened as he reached for her hand. You're right, he said, squeezing her fingers gently. I used to think I had to be something else for you, someone different, someone better. But now, I know that all you ever needed was me, just as I am. And that's all I want to give you. Emily felt a rush of emotion in her chest, hearing the sincerity in his words. She had always known that Henry's love was real, but hearing him voice his own transformation, how he had learned to accept himself, just as he was, made her love him even more. They had both changed in ways they hadn't anticipated, and together, they had become better versions of themselves. I love you, Emily said, her voice filled with more emotion than she expected. Henry leaned in and kissed her gently, as though he was sealing the truth of their connection. I love you too, he whispered against her lips. The next few months were filled with plans for the future. They began to talk about the life they wanted to build together, not just in the here and now, but in the years to come. Emily had always thought about success in terms of career and achievement, but now she was thinking about success in terms of her life with Henry. They discussed moving to a new house, a place where they could both create a home, a space that was theirs, full of memories, laughter, and love. They even talked about starting a family one day, a dream that Emily had never fully allowed herself to consider until now. Henry's influence on her life had brought out the parts of her she had long buried, the parts that craved connection, security, and the deep, unwavering love they had found in each other. They spent weekends together, visiting potential homes, talking about where they would live and how they wanted their life to look. Every time they talked about their future, Emily felt a sense of joy that she had never known before. She wasn't just planning for herself anymore. She was planning for them. One evening, as they sat in the backyard of their new home, Emily looked over at Henry. Can you believe it? She asked, a smile spreading across her face. We've come so far. Henry turned to her, his eyes filled with admiration. I can't believe it, he said softly. But I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. With you. Emily's heart swelled at his words. They had faced so much together, doubts, fears, and obstacles, but they had always come through it stronger. And now, as they stood on the brink of their future, she knew that their love was unbreakable. I never thought I could have a life like this, Emily said quietly. A life that's not just about success, but about the people I love, the life I've built with you. Henry reached out, taking her hand in his. It's all worth it, he said, his voice full of certainty. And no matter what comes next, we'll face it together. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees was the only noise in the air as they stood there in the quiet of their backyard, looking out at the future they had created together. Emily knew that no matter what came their way, they would be okay. They had each other. And that was enough. In the weeks that followed, they made the final preparations for their new life. They continued to build their home, making it a reflection of their shared dreams. And even as their lives grew busier with new responsibilities and changes, they never lost sight of what mattered most, each other. And so, Emily and Henry's journey continued. They didn't have all the answers, and the road ahead was uncertain. But they knew that together, they could face anything. Love, they had learned, was not a perfect fairy tale. It was a beautiful, imperfect reality, one that they would live every day, hand in hand, for the rest of their lives. Ignite your passion for success with this heartfelt journey through millionaire stories, where love, perseverance, and the pursuit of dreams intertwine. Follow the story of a young woman who, despite the pressures of family and career, finds her true path with a man who makes her feel truly alive. Together they navigate the complexities of life, proving that love and determination can lead to unimaginable growth. In these millionaire stories, Witness the power of choosing your own happiness over external expectations. The challenges they face will resonate with anyone who's ever had to choose between what's expected and what feels right. Explore these transformative millionaire stories that showcase the true meaning of success, not just in wealth, but in relationships and personal fulfillment. With each decision and each obstacle, they redefine what it means to succeed, showing us that real wealth comes from building a life you love. These millionaire stories teach us that success is more than just a financial gain. It's about finding balance, building meaningful connections, and staying true to yourself, even in the face of adversity.